Hi everyone, and welcome back to Pleasure Principles, where we dive deep into topics that empower and educate. Today, we're exploring the lives and contributions of 10 groundbreaking individuals who have shaped the field of sexual health and education. Their work has paved the way for greater understanding, acceptance, and health in our world today. Let's get started. First, we have Margaret Sanger, a woman ahead of her time. Imagine in the early 20th century talking about birth control was taboo, but Margaret, she saw the struggles women faced, the lack of control over their own bodies, and she knew something had to change. She opened the first birth control clinic in the United States. Can you imagine the bravery that took back then? This was a time when women having access to contraception was unheard of, even considered scandalous. But Margaret persisted. She knew this was about fundamental rights for women. She went on to found Planned Parenthood, an organization that's still a cornerstone of reproductive health care today. Margaret faced legal battles, she faced social stigma, but she never backed down from her fight for women's reproductive rights. Her courage, her dedication, it paved the way for generations of women to have control over their bodies and their lives. Now, let's talk about Alfred Kinsey, a man who wasn't afraid to tackle a subject many considered taboo: sex. In the 1940s and 50s, when talking about sex openly was practically unheard of, Kinsey dared to ask the questions no one else would. He wanted to understand human sexual behavior, not based on assumptions or societal norms, but on actual data. And so he embarked on a groundbreaking research project, interviewing thousands of people about their sexual experiences. The results, published in his famous Kinsey reports, were shocking to many. They revealed that human sexuality was far more diverse and complex than anyone had imagined. Kinsey's work challenged the rigid sexual morality of the time, showing that sexual behaviors considered deviant were actually quite common. His research helped to destigmatize homosexuality, premarital sex, and other practices, paving the way for greater acceptance and understanding. Now let's delve into the fascinating work of Dr. William Masters and Virginia Johnson, a duo who brought science into the bedroom, so to speak. In the 1960s, they decided to study human sexual response in a way that had never been done before, in the laboratory. Can you imagine the audacity? They observed and recorded the physiological responses of volunteers during sexual activity. Their research, published in their book, Human Sexual Response, was a revelation. It provided the first comprehensive scientific understanding of what happens to our bodies during sexual arousal and orgasm. Masters and Johnson didn't shy away from the complexities of sexual dysfunction either. They developed groundbreaking therapies for issues like erectile dysfunction and anorgasmia, using behavioral techniques to help people overcome these challenges. Their work revolutionized sex therapy, making it a more evidence-based and effective field. Now let's talk about a woman who made a groundbreaking discovery about female anatomy, Dr. Helen O'Connell. For centuries, the clitoris, that little button of pleasure, was often ignored or misrepresented in anatomical textbooks, but Dr. O'Connell, a dedicated urologist, knew there was more to the story. In the 1990s, she conducted detailed anatomical studies that revealed something astonishing. The clitoris is much larger and more complex than previously thought. Her research showed that the clitoris extends internally, with structures that wrap around the urethra and vagina. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of female sexual anatomy and had profound implications for women's health. Dr. O'Connell's work highlighted the importance of accurate anatomical knowledge for the diagnosis and treatment of sexual dysfunction in women. And now, a woman I know quite well, and you probably do too, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, or as everyone calls her, Dr. Ruth. This is a woman who wasn't afraid to talk about sex openly and honestly at a time when it was still considered taboo. With her charming accent and her disarming humor, Dr. Ruth became a beloved media personality, using radio and television to reach millions with her message of sexual health and well-being. She answered questions about everything from contraception to sexual positions, always with a blend of frankness and warmth. Dr. Ruth made it okay to talk about sex, to ask questions, to seek help when needed. She helped to destigmatize sexuality and empower people to embrace their sexual selves. Now let's step back in time to the late 19th century, a time of great sexual repression, and meet Havelock Ellis, a British physician who dared to challenge the status quo. Ellis was fascinated by human sexuality, but not in a judgmental way. He believed in studying sex scientifically, without imposing moral judgments. He wrote extensively about topics that were considered taboo at the time, such as homosexuality, masturbation, and transgender experiences. His work, though controversial, helped to chip away at the Victorian notion that sex was solely for procreation and that any other sexual expression was deviant. Ellis's writings paved the way for a more open and accepting view of sexuality. Now let's meet a woman who dedicated her life to ensuring young people had access to accurate and comprehensive sex education, Dr. Mary Calderone. As the medical director of Planned Parenthood in the 1950s, she saw firsthand the consequences of ignorance and misinformation about sex. She believed that young people deserve to have accurate information about their bodies, relationships, and sexual health. So she co-founded the Sexuality, Information and Education Council of the United States, or SIECUS, an organization that advocated for sex education in schools. Dr. Calderone faced fierce opposition from those who believed sex education was inappropriate, but she persevered, knowing that knowledge was power. Her tireless efforts helped to make sex education a more accepted part of the curriculum, benefiting generations of young people. Now, let's talk about a woman who revolutionized our understanding of female sexuality, Cher Haidt. In the 1970s, during the height of the sexual revolution, Haidt felt that women's voices were still largely missing from the conversation about sex. So she decided to conduct her own research, focusing specifically on women's experiences and perspectives. Her book, The Haidt Report, based on thousands of questionnaires from women across the United States, became an instant bestseller and sparked a national conversation. Haidt's research challenged the prevailing notion that women's sexuality was passive and centered around male pleasure. She revealed that women had diverse sexual desires, enjoyed a wide range of sexual practices, and often struggled to achieve orgasm through intercourse alone. Her work empowered women to embrace their sexuality, to demand pleasure, and to challenge the double standards that still existed in the bedroom. Now let's talk about a figure who is both revered and reviled in the world of psychology, Sigmund Freud. Love him or hate him, there's no denying that Freud had a profound impact on how we view sexuality. In the late 19th century, Freud dared to suggest that sexuality was a fundamental driving force in human behavior, influencing our thoughts, emotions, and actions from a very young age. His theories, though often controversial and now considered outdated by many, helped to bring sexuality out of the shadows and into the realm of scientific inquiry. Freud's work paved the way for other psychologists and sexologists to explore the complexities of human sexual desire, development, and dysfunction. Finally, let's meet a true pioneer in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights, Magnus Hirschfeld. In the early 20th century, when homosexuality was widely considered a mental illness or a crime, Hirschfeld dedicated his life to advocating for the acceptance and understanding of sexual diversity. He founded the Institute for Sexual Science in Berlin, a groundbreaking institution that provided counseling, legal aid, and education for LGBTQ+ individuals. Hirschfeld's institute was a haven for those who were persecuted for their sexuality or gender identity. He believed in the power of science and education to combat prejudice and discrimination. Tragically, Hirschfeld's work was destroyed by the Nazis, who burned his institute and its vast library. But his legacy lives on, inspiring generations of activists and researchers to continue the fight for LGBTQ+ equality. These individuals, each in their own way, have been instrumental in shaping how we understand sexual health, identity, and relationships. Their contributions have challenged societal norms, broken down barriers, and promoted healthier attitudes towards sexuality. While each of these figures faced resistance and controversy, their dedication has led to a more inclusive and informed understanding of sexual health today. Thanks for joining me on this journey through history. If you're passionate about sex education and want to learn more, make sure to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up and share it with anyone you think could benefit from learning about these amazing pioneers. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and take pleasure in learning.